Hi everyone, today's objectives is solving quadratic equation by factoring. There's a whole bunch of different ways to solve quadratic. We are going to start the first type. It's called zero factor theorem or zero product property, and some other books will call it zero product property. The reason they call it zero factor or zero product property is they are taking something that you guys know anything times zero is zero. Here's the definition. If A and B are real numbers and A times B equals zero, then either A has to equal zero or B has to equal zero. That is the whole case. For example, if A, let's say is 3, B is 0, okay? Those are real numbers. But A times B equals 0, so either A, which is 3, equals 0, or B equals 0. In this case, it's B equals 0. Or vice versa, you can have 0 times 5, 0 times negative 2, anything like that will work. So one of them has to equal 0. Now, based on that, we have to solve the quadratic equation. Now, the reason it's quadratic equation is because if you FOIL it out, x times x is going to be x squared. So the highest exponent is going to be x squared. So what they are saying is, for example, if this is 0 times, I don't care the second parenthesis is, it's going to be 0. Or you can have the second parenthesis equals 0, and you don't mind what is going to be the first parenthesis going to be. It will still equal to 0. So because that thought, that gives you the setup of little tiny equation, I call it. But this is the setup of zero product property or zero factor theorem. Factor is because this is a multiplication. If it's not multiplication, you can't do that, because anything times 0 is 0. Just solve the little tiny equation is x plus 2 equals 0. So I'm forcing this first part equals 0 or second part equals 0, but we are just finding all the possibility. So really just minus 2, x equals negative 2, and minus 3, x equals negative 3. The number negative 2 and negative 3 will force the equation parenthesis x plus 2 times x plus 3 equals 0. Now let's take a look at it just to check. If I have negative 2 plus 2 times, doesn't matter, negative 2 plus 3, does that equal 0? This part equals 0 times, doesn't matter which other part is going to be, does that equal to 0? Is where it comes from. And same thing when you plug in negative 3 plus 2 is going to be negative 1 times negative 3 plus 3, that's equal 0. And that's why this whole thing works. And that's called the zero product property or zero factor theorem. Please try number 2 yourself. So for answer number 2, n equals 6 and n equals negative 1. Can I please just switch the sign? Yes, if the letter is 1. So I would like you to follow through because we can eventually get fractions. That's a process you should get used to it. So that's number 2. Example number 3 has a y square, 3, remember, times 3y plus 4. So when you have a times, that's your separation. But you also see y squared. So in this case, it really is y squared is y times y. So y times 3y plus 4. Now, because y times y is going to be just the same thing, so I'm going to just say y equals 0 because when you have something multiplied, it had to equal to 0. And then the next one is 3y plus 4 equals 0, and then solve it. So minus 4, and you have 3y equals negative 4. And divide by 3 and divide by 3. Now notice we are having fractions. So the answer for this problem is going to be the number 4 over 3 and the number 0. All the two numbers is going to be equal to, the two numbers is going to be the solutions for making this equation equal 0. If you look at example number 4, it's a totally different form. It doesn't have parentheses, it doesn't have anything, that's just multiply each other. You actually have something you have to factor. Remember going back to factors 1 and 2, this is 1 and 5. You need to get 9 in the middle. If you do 1 and 2, and you flip it 5 and 1, that gives you 10, and that gives you 1. And then one of them has to be negative. Now I want the 10 to be positive because I have a positive 9. So that's going to be positive, that's going to be negative. So then your factor is again sideways. It's going to be x plus 5 and 2x minus 1 equals 0. Then you have to solve it because the time we had to solve it is when you see the equal sign. If you do not see the equal sign, hint to solve. If you don't have the equal sign, you don't have to solve it. So because it's equal to 0, you gotta be able to tell me x plus 5 equals 0, solve it. 2x minus 1 equals 0, solve it. So minus 5 on both sides, you have x equals negative 5. You have plus 1 on both sides. You have 2x equals 1. Divide by 2 on both sides, x equals half. So your answer for the quadratic equation is going to be x equals negative 5 and x equals half. Pause the video and try number 5 yourself. Example number 5. Here is the work I have, and please make sure the first parenthesis y equals negative 2 over 3. The answer for the second one is going to be negative 1 over 4. And those are the numbers that's going to make 12y squared plus 11y plus 2 equals 0. Now example number 6 is a little different because then we now also using something that you know from before. If you look at the problem, you're going to have to look at for greatest common factor, and that's going to be x squared minus 3x minus 10. And once you do that equals 0, then you have to factor. That's 1 and 1, and that's 1 and 10, 2 and 5. 1 and 1 and 2 and 5, that can give you the negative 3. So that's negative 5. That's a positive 2, and that's going to be negative 3. And the answer is going to be x times x plus 2, and then x minus 5 equals 0. And then so you have to set up the equation for 3 of them. X equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. And then you do minus 2 on both sides, x equals negative 2, and plus 5 on both sides, and x equals positive 5. Now also, I want you to have a hint about how many answers you have. So here's your hint. What is the largest, highest degree of the polynomial? Highest degree of the polynomial is 3. And you should have 3 answers. Right here, right here, right here. Highest degree tells you how many answers you're going to have. Now, the problem is you kind of say, but remember, before I was looking at something that if I have y squared times y, I really have y to the third power. But how come I only have 2 answers? The reason you have 2 answers is because the y squared, that is the same exact thing. So if you want to, you can really rewrite it for another y equals 0. But we don't have to because it's the same answer. So you only have to write it as one of them. So this y3 is because the end could be the same. So just so you keep those 2 things in mind. So for now, please try number 7. Answer for number 7, you have to find out what they have in common, and that is 4x right here. And then what you're going to do is you can actually factor out the trinomial, and that's going to be x plus 2 and 3x minus 1. So therefore, you do have 3 answers. X equals 0 right here, and x equals negative 2, and x equals 1/3. So because exponent is 3, so you have 3 answers. Example number 8, one of very important thing is when you're solving quadratic, you have to have one side equals 0. And for number 8, you don't have it. So what we're going to do is we are going to make sure everything clears out to the other side, so one side equals 0. I personally like to keep the y squared as positive. Since 6y squared is already positive, I'm going to move the 4 and the negative 28y to make sure that it gets 0 for 0 product property. So I'm going to minus 4, and then that's going to be 6y squared minus 5y minus 4 equals negative 28y. Then you're going to add 28y both sides. 6y squared plus 23y minus 4 equals 0. Now we have the 0 product property. What I can do is I'm going to break it down. That's going to be 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's going to be 1 and 4, 2 and 24 right there. So I'm going to go 1 and 6, 4 and 1, and that's going to give you positive 24, and that's going to give you the 1. Now, since I want positive 23, I'm going to have positive 24, and then that's going to be negative. That's going to be 23. So then this guy has to be negative. 6 has to match up with negative 1. Parenthesis is going to be x plus 4 equals 0. 6x minus 1 equals 0. Please go ahead, solve the rest of it. The answer for number 8 is x equals negative 4 and x equals 1 over 6. Example number 9 is a little bit trickier. For example number 6, notice no sides equals 0, so you can just move around. But number 9 is not just a plus minus sign. They have a multiplication sign between the x and the parenthesis. But then you also have a negative 6. So when this kind of situation happens, you have to make sure you multiply and then get everything else out of the parentheses, then move it, then equals 0, then factor. Distribute, so that's x squared minus 5x equals negative 6. After you distribute it, then you can move them. If one side does not equal 0, you have to take them apart, move them around, then factor. If you have one side equals 0 already, like the ones before in number 1, you can solve it. But because this is not 0, you need to get everything to one side and take everything out of the parenthesis, then before you can move it and set one side equals 0. So I'm going to minus 6 plus 6 on both sides, and that's going to be x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now you can factor. So that's going to be 1 and 1, and I will have 1 and 6, 2 and 3. So if I go with 2 and 3 and they both negative, I will get negative 2, and that's negative 3, and that's going to be negative 5. If you do 1 and 6, your sign will not work for the 6 at the end, which has to be positive. Answer is going to be x minus 2 and x minus 3 equals 0, and then that's going to be x minus 2 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and then therefore plus 2 on both sides. One of the answer equals 2, the other answer is going to equal to 3, and those are your answer for the problems. Example number 10. Following the same rules is example number 9. Notice it's multiplication and one side is not 0 to make sure you distribute and then move everything to one side. So what you're going to do is you are going to say x times x, x squared, x times negative 5, that's what we did before, and then plus 3x minus 15, and then equals 20. And if you combine like term, that would be x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 20. But minus 20 should be written out, and then you have x squared minus 2x minus 35 equals 0. Multiply them out first, and then move the 0. Multiply my parentheses, then set equation to 0. Here I'm going to factor. That's going to be 1 and 1, and this is going to be 1 and 35, 2, 3, doesn't work, 5. And 7. 5 and 7 you can see is negative 2. The 7 has to be negative. The 5 has to be positive. That's how I get the negative 2. And that's how I get my negative 35. And the answer is going to be x. The factors is going to be x plus 5 times x minus 7 equals 0. And then set them equal to 0. So you have x plus 5 equals 0. X minus 7 equals 0. Minus 5 on both sides. X equals negative 5. On this second one, plus 7, you have x equals 7. So those will be your two answers. X equals negative 5, x equals 7. That's how you deal with when one side is not equal 0 and there's multiplications. Look like it's already factored. So you gotta make sure take it out of the factors first and move your number to the other side so one side equals 0, then factor. And those are the problems like number 9 and 10. One side has to equal 0. Now 11 is a word problem, which is a lot of you guys will get so scared and then you stop working at it. But it's not that hard. Everything is tell you read it slow. So let's start with all the information. So number 11 says the equation h equals negative 16t squared plus h sub 0. That's called h sub 0. And that's called describe the height h in phi of an object after falling from the initial height h sub 0. And in that case, that means the height before the ball start moving, and t for time, which is seconds. An object is dropped from the height, here, initial height. This is my h sub 0. When the object reaches 344 feet, how much time has elapsed? When the object reaches 344 feet, how much time has elapsed? One more piece of information it says right here. Describe the height, which is h. So the equation is h equals negative 16 t squared plus h sub 0. Now h sub 0 is going to be the initial height. Initial height is going to be object dropping from 600 feet. So that's going to be 600 plus. And the t is what we are trying to find because guess what? It says right here how much time is passed. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave t alone. So t is right here and then negative 16 equals, now here's the h. Now h is going to be height where it reaches when the object is going to be right here, 344. So that's going to be 344. So now what you're going to do is you are going to solve this equation. Everything going to be located. Well, to solve it, you are going to minus 600 minus 600. And then that is going to be negative 16t squared equals 600 minus 344 be negative 256. I want my t squared to be positive if I want to factor it. So I'm going to add 16t to set one side equals 0 plus 16t squared. And you can have 16t squared minus 256 equals 0. You also should notice this is the two term. Can we square root 16? Yes. Can we square root t? Yes. Can we square root 256? Square 256 is going to be 16. So actually you can pull out 16. So if you pull out 16, that's going to be t squared minus 256 divided by 16. And that's also going to be 16. That is a factor you can factor from special difference of a square. You can have 16 and t plus 4 and t minus 4 equals 0. Now the problem with here is you're going to have t, solve it, t plus 4 equals 0, and t minus 4 equals 0. And if you solve it, you have t equals negative 4, and you have plus 4 on both sides. You have t equals positive 4. Now the problem is it asks you how much time has passed. Now if we are talking about the time, which is right here, you can never talk about that is a negative. Time should always be positive. So in this case, the only t equals 4 will work. The question should be answered as in seconds. 4 seconds pass for the object to reach 344 feet. And that will be your notes for today. And thank you so much for watching.